It was evening. Rain pattered against the window. The thunder was so loud that the windows rattled. Suddenly, I heard Marcel's voice. She was calling me. I rushed out to the porch. There, dirty and drenched, my sister sat on the floor, clutching her stomach and leaning against the old chest that was our family heirloom. Her face was pale, and her lips quivered. Marcel removed her bloodied hand from her stomach, and I saw a terrible wound under her t-shirt. I grabbed the blanket covering the chest and pressed it against the wound. As I was calling an ambulance, my sister fainted. I spent the following 5 hours at the hospital. The deep wound had been caused by something sharp, but saving Marcel was not to be. My younger sister died without ever regaining consciousness. The police interrogated me. It was hard to speak, tears choked me. And what did I know? Only that for the past year, Marcel had been working as a fitness club coach, and that evening she went out for a run, from which she returned with the wound in her stomach. Could she have been jogging with someone else? In the past, yes, with her 2 friends, Paul and Jean. Paul was the boy who split her head open with the skate when they were in their teens. For that, our parents made him shovel snow from our yard all winter. That's how Marcel became friends with him. In college, tall, red-haired Jean stuck to Paul like a burr. They hung out as a trio ever since. Their common obsession was the computer game called Knives Out. They spent days and nights playing it, searching for artifacts and defending themselves from rivals with cold weapons. But in the past year, Marcel had been working, and she spent less time with her friends. The police searched our house but found nothing suspicious. I was stricken with grief and didn't leave home for a week. Jean called me several times, but the conversations were reduced to awkward silence. And so I stopped answering his calls. Marcel was my family, my friend, and even my child. When I was 20 and she was 10, our parents died in a car crash and I became her guardian. We had no other relatives. As such, my sister was everything to me. A week later, they allowed me to bury her. The autopsy showed that the wound hadn't been inflicted by an ordinary knife. Its blade was at least 15 centimeters long and crescent-shaped. The farewell ceremony was modest. Paul brought a dozen of her college friends to the cemetery. John also came, though he was late. But after the burial, he walked me home. Along the way, it seemed like he wanted to say something but couldn't muster the courage. He never told me, and so I said goodbye and went inside the house. There, I was surprised to find that the door was ajar, but there was nobody inside. However, the corner of the living room rug was flipped up. Marcel and I had learned to lift our feet so as not to catch it. Yet after we had guests, the rug always needed adjusting. This told me for sure that someone had been in the house. And then it dawned on me. What if my sister had hidden something in the house and was killed because of it? Our great-grandfather built the house. He was a military man and had been to many hot spots around the world. Having witnessed various horrors, he anticipated the need for several secret places in the house where one could hide food, valuables, and even people. One of them was in the chest on the porch, where the blankets were kept. Beneath them was a false bottom. There, I found a bloodied flash drive and a phone. The phone required charging and the memory stick was protected by a password. I spent an hour trying to guess it, but to no avail. Paul lived a few houses down from us, so I went to see if he could help. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. I walked around the house. "My son's not home," Mr. Davis said, sitting in a wheelchair under the awning. My gaze slid over Paul's car. "It's broken down," the old man grunted. Paul took a cab and went out on his errands. Suddenly I wondered how Marcel got home with such a wound. Could someone have given her a ride? I peered through the car window but noticed nothing suspicious. The car glistened in the sun, and it was apparent it had been washed recently. So if there had been any traces, they were gone now. I bid Mr. Davis farewell and walked away, wondering whether a caring son like Paul could be involved in Marcel's death. Unaware, I found myself back at the cemetery. And there, I met Paul. He was wiping his hands clean of dirt. Seeing me, he tucked his hands into his pockets. He explained that he had brought Marcel a gift, the first edition of Knives Out, the game they played as teenagers. Indeed, there was a box with a disc on her grave. I asked him if he had given Marcel a ride home that evening. Paul confessed that he had picked her up from the fitness club, but she was already wounded. It turned out that Marcel had gotten herself into big trouble. It all started with a photo in a gamer's chat. It showed a man's hand holding a unique knife, the most expensive artifact in the game, worth billions of dollars. But the photo wasn't computer graphics. It was a real blade crafted to resemble the one from the game. It had an emerald blade and was crescent-shaped. Marcel had coveted that knife. Using special software, her friends figured out that the photo had been taken not far from the fitness club. Its owner, Carlos Morano, was renowned for his collection of cold weapons. That's why Marcel got a job at the club, to gain Morano's trust and coax the knife from him. Paul didn't know exactly how she was going to do it. His task was to drive to the fitness club and pick her up. When Marcel got into the car, she didn't have the knife, and she was already bleeding profusely. Paul wanted to take her to the hospital, but she insisted on going home. She said she had committed a crime and was afraid of the police. Paul panicked. If they were caught, who would take care of his father? So, he did as Marcel asked. It all seems so strange, I thought. I pulled out the flash drive and asked him to crack the password. Paul refused, saying he didn't want to be dragged into anything illegal again. I seethed with anger. What had he been thinking before? Couldn't he or Jean have talked Marcel out of this insane affair? Paul looked down and walked away silently. I glanced at the disc on my sister's grave, and it hit me. The password was Knives Out, and it worked. Reviewing the files on the flash drive, I realized Carlos Morano was a drug dealer, and Marcel had found it out. Through his club's coaches, the boss sold banned pills to the gym clients. The flash drive contained photo evidence, names of couriers and buyers, and distribution routes. The photos were amateurish. So, my sister had been spying on them herself. Why was I not surprised? But what had she been planning to do with all this? I had only one theory. She was going to blackmail Morano in exchange for the knife. Strange sounds woke me up at night. Someone was in the house. I tried to find my phone in the dark, but it wasn't there. I'd left it in another room. After a while, everything quieted down. I was certain it was Morano's people looking for the evidence. If they killed Marcel over it, they would eventually kill me too. Therefore, in the morning, I took the flash drive and went to the fitness club. I was taken to the boss's office, which was adorned with dozens of expensive knives. In the middle of the room, with his legs propped on the table, Carlos, a bald, muscular man in his 40s, swayed in his chair. Of course, I could have gone to the police, but I doubted that Carlos had set up his drug business without their knowledge. In a small town like ours, the police know everything. I laid the flash drive in front of Carlos and proposed a deal. I would give him the evidence Marcel had gathered, and he would guarantee not to kill me. Carlos growled that he didn't understand what I was talking about. What evidence? With a terrifying force, he punched the table with his fist, hitting the flash drive directly. It shattered into pieces. It seemed the man genuinely didn't understand what he had to do with Marcel's death. He said my sister was a weirdo who got her brain fried playing computer games. A few months ago, she'd asked him for a knife that didn't exist. But why would he kill her over that? To prove his innocence, Carlos showed me footage from all the surveillance cameras around the club. It turned out that Marcel hadn't even entered it that evening. She only met with a tall man whose face was hidden under a cap not far from the gym. They talked for a while, and then the man handed Marcel a long box. It could very well have contained the knife. Marcel smiled, and they parted ways. There was no footage of my sister getting into Paul's car. The car must have been parked in a blind spot out of the camera's reach. I had almost reached my home when I saw Jean coming out of it. Was he the one rummaging through my house all this time? But what was he looking for? I waited until he turned the corner and then slipped into the house. There, I locked myself in with extra locks and checked Marcel's phone, which had finally charged. It had only 2 contacts, Paul and Jean. First, I read their joint chat and realized that Paul had lied to me. He knew more than he'd told me. In fact, it was he who came up with the idea of blackmailing Carlos, and he pressured Marcel until she agreed. The last message Marcel sent to Paul on the day of her death contained the date and time of the meeting near the fitness club. As for Jean, he really did try to dissuade his friends from their plan. Then he quit the group chat, but he continued to communicate with Marcel separately. The last message in their personal chat was deleted. Marcel sent it at the same time as the last message addressed to Paul, and then she erased it. It seems she got the chats mixed up. So Jean also knew exactly when Marcel was going to meet with Carlos. I called Paul to ask if he had seen Jean near the fitness club that night. His father answered the phone. He said his son had gone on some errands and had left his phone at home. I asked where exactly he had gone, claiming I could probably catch him in town. Mr. Davis replied that Paul had a lot of things to do that day. His son had arranged surgery for him abroad and was sorting out matters related to the trip. This was really curious. Marcel had said Paul had no money to pay for his father's treatment. Where did he get it then? The knife my sister dreamed of, like a child dreams of a toy, could be a source of fortune. I remembered Paul's perfectly clean car interior. As such, to prove his involvement, I only had one option left. I had to find the knife. I suddenly recalled him wiping his hands off the dirt when we met at the cemetery. What if he'd buried something in Marcel's grave? I took a garden spade, and there I was an hour later shoveling dirt from my sister's grave, right where Paul had left the disc. After some time, the spade hit a box, the same one I had seen in the video from Carlos's cameras. Inside there was an emerald blade. Later, the police found Marcel's blood and Paul's fingerprints on it. On their way home, they had stopped in a grove to look at the knife. That's when he stabbed her with it and threw her out of the car to bleed out. Marcel's love for life was impressive, and she managed to make it home with all her might. At the interrogation, Paul confessed he was planning to sell the knife on the darknet and use the money to pay for his father's treatment. It turned out that, in reality, Jean owned the knife. He gave it to Marcel so she wouldn't risk meeting with Carlos, but he asked to keep it a secret. At our home, Jean was looking for his knife. Despite the evidence, he couldn't believe that Paul had murdered Marcel. My sister walked the knife's edge all her life, believing she had learned to conquer death. But she overlooked one thing. It's impossible to outplay death if you disregard life so easily.